And we're off. We'll cut there and move on. Welcome back to the I'm Telling God About This podcast, where we are definitely demonetized this month. We weren't talking to you last month because we're all grown men with jobs and stuff, and frankly, it was a miracle it took us that long to take 1 week break. So here we are. We're back, and it's Pride Month, and also the Southern Baptist Convention's going on, and you know, it's a good news and a good time to be a podcast focused on, you know, a biblical perspective on things that are going on in the world. Because as was it Moeller or someone from the Southern Baptist Convention said, we're having to say a lot of things out loud that we didn't really think we would have to. So here we are. Welcome, join us. Lots to talk about. So yeah, with that, I'll kick it over to you, Josh. What do you got for us?
Well, today we're going to talk about Pride Month, and here's the funny thing. We're like, man, what should we talk about? Is there going to be any content in June? And then we remembered, June makes its own controversy.
So much content.
It makes its own topics. Yeah, so today we're going to talk a little bit, just in general, about the Pride movement. I think that there's been a interesting change and shift this year. People are a little bit tired of it, I think. I think it's kind of gone through its phases where it's being forced. I feel like there's more memes than there is actual activism going on. At the same time, like, look, Pride Month has to make room for the Israeli-Palestinian protests. Like, they're at conflict with each other. So we're going to talk a little bit about the Pride Month, essentially what is going on in society, some of the ideology behind it from a Christian perspective, Christian worldview, and we're just going to give it enough rope to do some damage to itself. Just let it talk, and it tends to fall apart. But there's a lot of other stuff going on in the world, in the Pride Month, community, I suppose, or the Pride community, which is interesting, right? Pride. Why use that word?
I know, right? Well, it was fascinating to me, this Pride Month. You hit on something that I just think is a big theme that I kind of want to touch on with. I kind of maybe even this anchors other things that we're talking about the rest of the conversation. But we've been talking about the shift that we've been seeing in culture, especially in the U.S. How, up for the last decade, really, it's just been this. Every year it's getting systematically worse. And just when you think something's going to hit a nerve and create like this, universal gag reflex on, American society, and it just keeps getting worse and keeps getting worse. But like this year really has felt like we finally hit the threshold of people just being like, you know what? This ain't it. This ain't it.
Right.
And I don't know if it's, some people have credited, like the Gen Z people, coming of age and kind of looking back, because and it's fascinating because, our generation did not grow up with this stuff being, prolific. It was fringe even into college, out of college for people our age.
Yeah. We're talking about the last decade. To be perfectly
honest. Yeah, we're talking about in the last decade that this has come around. So imagine
we're all
if you
old
grow
enough,
up and it's not novel.
We were adults during the just let them get married phase.
Yeah, right. And now it's like this group of kids that are, coming of age now, they're in their 20s now, they've just grown up with this. Their entire conscious life, this has been the norm and like even the mainstream. And so maybe it's not surprising that now as they're coming of age and older, they're like, what? Like, that's like, this is dumb. Like, what's going on here?
Yeah. Right.
And,
why do you
we're starting to see, they're looking back and they're like, wait, why did we give up that way? Yeah. Like, our whole world was like this for how long, and then we do this now? Like, why did we stop doing that? That stuff seems pretty legit.
I think it's
family.
The emperor is. People are starting to see that the emperor has no clothes, right? So it doesn't.
Well, that's exactly the problem. They won't put on clothes. It's the opposite.
Welcome to the conversation.
Bro, it is ridiculous. The kinds of things, I mean, you don't have to look very far for, the Twitter posts and videos of some of these pride gatherings, and there's just grown men butt naked with their schlongs hanging out, and these kids are like, waving on it. Like, it's
actually
ridiculous.
Illegal. You're exposing yourselves to minors in these jurisdictions, and it's just a choice not to prosecute any of these things. These are child sex crimes by the letter of the law.
Right. And yet, so this is funny that you say that. So think about this. Do you remember the Tumblr? Do you remember when Tumblr got rid of porn a while back, or tried to?
When Tumblr deleted itself.
Nick probably does. Yeah, when Tumblr was relevant 10 years ago.
Right.
So Tumblr, there was all this pushback. Everyone was super sad. They were like, oh, but that's where I go to get, pornography. And so why are you reducing this? And it was all like, there was all this pushback against like free expression and all of this, right? Well, fast forward now, right? You know what was in the news the other day that I thought was fascinating is there's a huge push against X for continuing to allow pornographic material on the platform. Because people, and I was watching Brett Cooper's comment section, and she was showing comment after comment of like how people are like, dude, I'm just trying to get my news, and I'm scrolling through the comments trying to see how people feel about this, and I'm just being assaulted by random sex acts in the comments section, and they're like, dude, just like why do we need this here? Like get rid of this. And so it's just amazing to see the tone shift, in what people are okay with, and it's.
Yeah,
it's totally biblical because to me, what's amazing, and I've made this comment before about like with people ask questions like, well, why do bad things happen to good people, and why does God allow the world to continue to exist like this? And I think it comes down to the ultimate lesson that our lives are described as living or like trees, like plants, and how what we do and our choices affect how they grow and the fruit that they bear. And sometimes it's easy for us to continue living in sin or tolerating, aberrant behavior and horrible things because we don't have to deal with the fruit, the thing that comes out of it. And so what really I feel like we've been living through for the last decade is the maturity and like the development of this disgusting fruit of these poor choices that began.
It's a train that literally has no brakes because it philosophically can't have any brakes. There's no mechanism because they have no standard except opposition to what is good and pure and constructive.
Right.
So they literally cannot pick a spot. That's why when I see groups like Gays Against Groomers, right, who are like nominally to the right of the, maybe the mainstream pride movement, and it's like, what did you like? I'm sorry that you don't have a standard, but you don't just get to pick one day and say, no, we want to be X level of degenerate and no worse.
Right. I love that. Right. I have this conversation all the time. I'll tell people, they'll be like, oh, well, this, or this. And I'm like, okay, so like, according to what standard? Like where I'm like, I always look at them. I'm like, I'm just amazed by you. And they're like, well, what do you mean? It's just like, I just don't understand. If I didn't love Jesus, like I would be Genghis Khan. Like, I'd be a professional jewel thief. Like, what are you like? Why do you shackle yourselves? I mean, it must be so liberating. Like, why do you shackle yourselves to these notions of good and evil? Like, where do you feel? Like, what draws you to that? Like, where do you feel that?
Right, you look at historical characters, like Genghis Khan, like Stalin, and you're like, that's the most intellectually consistent version of a human being
that's
outside
integrity.
Of a religious.
Exactly.
Well, the argument is that secular humanism essentially learns from its mistakes, it evolves, and we see what works and what doesn't work. The problem is there is no enforcement really on a philosophical level to justify say that the behavior needs to happen this way and it's justified and authoritative by the society standard. Because really ultimately what happens is the individual just says, I don't want to live by society standards. Why should I have any obligation to do what you say? What do I care about the society standard? There's no authority.
No,
because
you
want your family you want your family to live, and you want your family and your business to flourish, and you want people to do nice. I don't care about people. Why?
Right.
I just care about myself. I can go and rob from the weak and give to myself.
That's the point, though. That's more imaginative. To Hugh's point, like they're saying, "No, I'm going to abandon all morality," and Josh is like, "Oh, so you can be a ruthless warlord?" They're like, "No, I just want to do butt stuff," and it's like, "Huh." That's
right. Yeah, and still,
okay.
But then I want to be social justice warrior. Like that's what kills me. It's like that because this is where it gets me. Is because this is how this conversation goes. I'm like, they're like, it's just, Christianity is just so many rules, and it's really unkind, and like the Bible justifies slavery, and it has all these things and whatnot, and I just unhinged myself from that. Like I don't want to be a part of any of that, but like you should feel really bad because like, how do you justify those things? And I'm like, wow, I mean, it's stunning and brave of you. And I want, like, how do you, like, what's it like? And they're like, what? And I'm just like, man, like, what is the draw that pulls you to like, how do you judge me? By what standard are you upset about that? Like, even if that's true, even if everything that you said about me is true and your version of the world is correct, then why is that a problem?
Yeah.
Well, and why is that a problem? Why can't I do that? Why can't I judge you if there's no actual standard? By what standard do you judge me? Like,
and let's just get out.
Yeah.
Let's just get out in front of the comments here real quick. And please, want to hear your comments. Honestly, talk to us. Let us know where you disagree with us.
Yes.
But here is, before you comment and say, oh, there's a bunch of straight white guys giving their opinions on the LGBT community. But let's talk about standards,
you're welcome.
guys. I know, right? But let's talk about standards. Let's talk about standards, right? If we value let's maybe even taking free speech out of the equation. Let's just maybe just keep it at standards. If there is no standard by which we are all obligated to behave and communicate, my opinion and disagreement with you and the abomination that the LGBT community is in the eyes of God, and that's very, very harsh language, right? There's no standard by which I'm wrong and you're right, or you're right and I'm wrong. We're just essentially talking past each other.
Well, so I think,
what authority
not even
by
that.
which
That's the question.
The comments
That's
out,
Josh,
right?
You said the question. Tell us that. Like, this is my thing. Is this? It's very simple. It's very simple. Moral outrage from an amoral perspective is foolishness.
Yeah.
Or I don't understand, which is entirely possible. But to this day, the only answer that I've been able to be given is, well, like, we decide, culture decides. And I'm like, okay, well, if culture decides, if might makes right, then Hitler was right. And there was nothing morally reprehensible about that, because the majority of the people, it's what they wanted. So what do you do? Or even better, than up until, the last 20, 30 years, homosexuality was wrong righteously because the majority of the global population viewed it that way, to include the scientific community.
Yeah.
So where are we getting these standards?
But I think it's the wrong path to go down. I think it's been the wrong path for about 20 years to go down the road of, oh, look at all of your logical inconsistency on the corrupt, degenerate side of this, right? Because we were pointing that out. They called it a slippery slope. What it actually was, and now we have in the fullness of time, we can prove that it was simply the logical conclusion of their abandonment of a standard. It's like, well, if you're going to accept gayness, then you've effectively abandoned any concept of differences between genders. And we said that 25 years ago, and then told them where it was going to lead. And they said, oh, you're just making slippery slope arguments because you don't have any real. No, I have a standard. You're throwing it out the window. Yeah. And we have exhausted, if there ever was, any utility of saying, oh, look how logically inconsistent you're being. You are dealing with evil people who are intentionally evil, and they simply want to destroy the standards by which we are supposed to be living. And because of that, you don't cast your pearls before swine. Okay, you have to be done having that argument in good faith with unrepentant degenerates.
Yeah.
Well,
let's
given
a month, and now what do we do with that?
Yeah, Nick, talk about, if you don't want to, just to bring you into this. You made a comment kind of in our chat pre-show talking about an incident that took place in your neighborhood. If you feel like.
Yeah,
kind of
no, I'm fine with that.
Yeah, no, that's a perfect example, I think, of what the problem here is. Why are we even having this conversation?
Yeah, I think, yes, I will mention that story, and it does pertain. But, yeah, I think Pride Month in and of itself, there's a lot to talk about in regards to how we operate, how we act, the fact that it is one of the 7 deadly sins, the fact that a bunch of churches are flying pride flags during Pride Month. There's a whole lot we can go on. And I am definitely very interested in having they got a month conversation. But one thing that did just happen in my world is we had a couple move into our neighborhood, 2 men, and they go on evening walks every evening, and they're holding hands, and they walk past my house. And so I have plenty of same-sex attracted friends, and I am in no way passing judgment, though I do think it is wrong and not okay and not endorsed by God. And I don't necessarily think we're having this "you all are wrong" conversation. That's not what this is right now. But I unfortunately have to engage with my 3-year-old on the realities of how God made man and how God made woman and what is marriage. And then I have to introduce him to the world he lives in. He will regularly encounter and engage 2 men that are holding hands, that might be kissing. And what does he do with that at the age of 3? And if you're not, and this is a really, very, really relevant, if you're not having age-appropriate conversations around the sex talk, sexuality, God's design at an early age because of things like Pride Month, we live in a culture that is going to very, very slowly, and you'll never see it happening, subliminally move inches and inches and inches and inches into your children's worldview until you wake up one day and the regular phone calls I get every week are 13-year-old's parents started having the sex talk with him, and they come to find out that he likes other guys or he's questioning his gender. And my immediate conversation is, when did you start? Or my immediate question is, when did you start having the sex talk? And inevitably they will say, we thought we had more time, and we waited until he was 12, 13,
and they
or 14
should have
to begin.
They should have had more time, and it was taken from them.
Right.
Yes,
Yeah.
and that's all.
sad.
The ship has sailed. You can, not you, Tim. I mean, the world can moan and whine and complain, but guess what? Sorry,
That's the world we're living
this is
in.
the hand we've been dealt.
Yeah, the
and
reason I
so
make
how
that
do
point, though,
we-
is because you have to remember that you're dealing with enemies. You have to remember that you're dealing with enemies who are stealing and trying to destroy everything that is sacred. And there is this constant, especially around now, to deal with them in good faith. And, oh, look at how hypocritical they are, the logic of this, and etc. And it's like, no, you're dealing with enemies, and you need to start acting like it. They are purposely putting their shrines in the middle of the street so that they can prosecute people when they have incidental tire marks in it. They are laying it out to trip you up.
Right.
Because they are enforcing their blasphemy laws.
Right.
What did
and
you
they
say?
know
Like
us-
you don't want tire marks on pride flags? Well, then don't put them in the street.
But that's the point, is that they do want the tire marks on them because they need to have the act of blasphemy take place so that they can go and prosecute the people.
so they can
that
call
are
it blasphemy.
Right.
So they can call it blasphemy, because even the call. I literally have been listening to Brandon Sanderson, Mistborn, and I love this quote. It was like someone. See, if you guys ever read Mistborn, Brandon Sanderson, I just started. Everyone's talking. Apparently, very good.
I don't have
fantasy
time to read all of those books.
Yeah,
It's like 50 of them.
There are, but I'm on Audible. But anyway, but he makes this
good.
point. It's like this person talks about like the Lord High. You know, she like uses his name in vain, effectively, and he's like, don't even curse. He's like, don't even use his name as a curse, because the blasphemy lends itself to credibility. And so, like, you know, Nick, to your point, I really like what you're pointing out, because this is really important. Like, we cannot neglect. It's just the different. Let me back up. This is the fundamental difference between like conservatives and progressives. Conservatives write laws based on the way that the world is, and progressives write laws based on the way that they wish the world was. Okay? And a lot of times, one of the places that conservatives and Christians fall into this trap is in exactly what you're talking about, where we don't act the right way because we fail to because we feel like we shouldn't have to, and because we fail to recognize the reality of the situation we're living in. And to your point, the current climate is what it is, and it is a travesty, and we do mourn it, and it is frustrating, and we should be upset about it. And to be honest, we should make that a little bit more apparent, because even as you began the story, because I have friends and people that I work with and who are homosexuals or same-sex attracted, and I care about them as people, right? And so because I don't want to hurt somebody, I feel the urge to hedge, to be soft and to be gentle, which I think is good. But at the same time, nobody is asking that about us because they feel vindicated. They feel validated. They feel like not to make an overly extreme case, but it's like, why would we feel sympathy for Nazis? That's how they view our perspective. And so they make no bones about putting that out there, or they don't feel the need to be considerate about what that means for us. I want a homosexual couple to think twice about walking in front of my house in PDA. Not because
if it were up to me, it would be
afraid
illegal.
of hurting me, but because if they actually cared about me as a person, they would care about what they want my children to think
that's
about,
an interesting point, Josh. It's almost like, what is it, 10, 15 years ago? It's like, what you do behind closed doors, I don't really care. Just don't push it on me.
Yeah.
Well, you don't hear like the homosexual community talking like that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But you don't hear the homosexual community talking about that. You don't have, well, what you do behind closed doors, straight people, just don't push it on me.
No, that's what they say.
And
they
I
do
won't
say that.
Well, no, hold on. They don't take this stance of just let me be me. And I'll let you be you. That's not the stance. The stance is you need to affirm, you need to acknowledge, and you need to allow me to do whatever I want to do. All the while, you need to suppress what you do. Right.
Because they would say
it's not like they're coming at the traditional conservative view of sexuality and a biblical view of men and women, as they're not coming at it as, well, that's fine, that's okay, I'll live over here separately. It's not that at all. In fact, the entire ideology has always been about, when we talked about this with the Boy Scout episode, about infiltrating the actual institution and destroying it from within.
Absolutely.
Not because they want to start, because it's not good enough for them to have their, and when I say them, it's just saying this ideology. It's not good for this ideology to be separate and build its own thing, but rather it has to destroy the standards of goodness, of what it is and what the biblical worldview is.
That is the fundamental problem that we have in our country, because our country was designed originally to recognize the fact that people have different worldviews, but that we could cooperate on matters of trade and defense, and that we would be isolated and we'd be free to define for ourselves the values and the things in which that we would hold. The things that we merged around collectively were that we all had inalienable rights, like we look at the preamble to the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, right? And this is the problem, is that it's this globalist mindset of, it's hilarious to me that they want to make it sound like we're the ones who are out trying to force our views on everybody else. But in reality, it's entirely the other way around. It's not
just standing
that
still.
You can't go right. It's not that you can't go.
We're
live
just
your
holding
life
our ground
somewhere else. Why is it not okay for a community to say we're not okay with that? Why is it not okay for a community to vote collectively and say that this is illegal and we don't want it in our school, even in our school boards or in our local states? That's not enough. You want to make it federally legal. Why? So you can do whatever you want, wherever you want. Well, that's the thing about liberty. Liberty exists in tension, where your rights exist only so far as they don't trample your fundamental rights. Only exist so far as they don't trample mine. And when you try to put something at the federal level that undermines fundamental view of the world, I am a man created in the image of God, the image and likeness of God. He made them male and female. That is fundamental to my worldview. When you try to tell me that that's not real and that I can't live my life as if that's real, functionally, practically, when you tell me I can't raise my children to believe that, yes, they do. That's and I draw the line. I draw the line there, because if you and that's where. And that's what we need people, especially in the church, to understand. It's not just simply acknowledging pronouns. It's not those things. It's a slippery slope. The good news is, I think, is that society is realizing that. I think what is coming around is we're seeing.
And politically, and the funny thing is, I disagree with you on because you say this is where I draw the line. And I say no. I'm going to draw the line about 50 feet behind us, because that's where we went wrong. That's where we went wrong.
Yeah.
That compromise attitude of, oh, okay, well, fine, you can go be gay and you don't have to lie about it or pretend, but just do it in your own home. That's what got us here. That brand of compromising conservatism of, oh, well, I guess you do have some liberty, that is how we got where we are. The line does not belong where we are today on the next threshold. It belongs probably somewhere in the early 80s. Would be
right.
You know
Tim,
what?
Let me ask you this question. And this is not a pushback in any way, but this is more of a practical, like, how, right? So if we look at the Old Testament, and Israel was the nation that was formed that God chose, and then he gave him the Torah, right, which is the law, civil law of how to live, right? In the Torah, it was not a ideal system for living. In fact, it allowed certain aspects that we would agree today that God finds as abominations and evil, like slavery, right? It allowed certain things within the Old Testament because God is a God that meets people where they're at and said, look, in the society and the day and age that you're living, and the way that the world is, this is how you are to be pleasing to God. Now, Jesus came and clarified and said, I am the fulfillment. You've heard it said that you can divorce your wife, but or you've heard it said that if you, love or hate your enemies, but I say love your enemies, right? So there's clarification. There's the ultimately, like, this is the standard. The standard is much higher than what the Torah brought. So the question, granted, we are in a society where we screwed up, but here we are in today's age, right? What, other than, I feel like the stance that you're taking, again, this is not something that I'm disagreeing with or challenging you on, but
calm down.
The stance that we're taking, right? The stance that we're taking is,
come at me, bro.
Hey, no, there's no, like, let's just take black and white. Let's done tomorrow. If we could legislate homosexuality as being illegal and a federal offense, we could.
It wouldn't be the first time. It wouldn't be the first time.
So the question is, like, is that what?
Do that?
No.
What
would you make
it a federal
illegal?
Offense?
Yeah. Would you make
I don't think I would.
Okay.
I don't think I would because then we move into
No, I just wanted to establish where we were. Yeah. So
right,
ask your
exactly.
question.
So
I interrupted you.
Sorry. So I would say that. So the question is then, knowing what we know about how God operates and operated with an evil people, right, in the Old Testament, and even the patience that he had with them as they were worshiping Asherah and sacrificing their children to Moloch and Baal. In this day and age, right, we've made mistakes as the church by not standing firm. What do we do now? What do you think God's approach would be?
Okay, so the argument that and let me see if I can just synthesize this so I'm not answering something that you're not saying, is that
it was a long
God
question, sorry.
In the Old Testament with the nation of Israel chose a evolutionary approach to elevating their morality, as opposed to becoming in by divine decree and trying to compel a wholesale remaking of the ancient world. Okay, and that because of that and this was affirmed in the New Testament, just to be clear, I agree with that. Jesus said Moses allowed you to get divorced because of the evilness of your own hearts, right? And because of that evolutionary approach that God demonstrated in the Old Testament, that you think that is a relatively timeless pattern for dealing with broad cultural evil in terms of pervasive unbelief and affirmation of immorality today. Is that fair?
I think so. I think yeah.
It's not a gotcha. I'm just.
No, I think
you're
so.
right to be suspicious.
I think that's
but
right.
I'm not.
Because it is a trap.
With Tim. Yeah. No, I think it's interesting. Good. Yeah. Like, what would we do today?
Because here's the thing. I think the distinction that you're making, that I think is not comparable to today, is that it was God himself, who chose not to, by divine fiat, create wholesale a new system and compel them into it. Now, that's not to say he didn't make some pretty aggressive changes to their way of doing things at times. But, however, then when you have Elijah going up to Mount Carmel, right? This is where they've been evil for quite some time. They've slain the prophets. They've blasphemed God in just about every way that they knew how. God once again demonstrates, no, this is where the standard is. The standard rains fire from heaven, and then it was the people of Israel who put all of the prophets of Baal to the sword in the immediate aftermath. That was implemented. That was not an evolutionary approach. Now, Elijah could have said, God was gracious with us in the past. He didn't immediately try and upend our normal ways of thinking about our relationships with each other so that we could, have a, let's say, easier, less disruptive transition into this higher sense of morality as it's revealed to us as we're ruled by God. So we need to take an evolutionary approach to all the prophets of Baal. No, we are dealing with the prophets of Baal today, and we have every right and reason to oppose them with whatever the maximum amount of force and influence we can.
So let's take that in the same situation. So we got this LGBT community that we want to take the Elijah approach. What if we're running into the same issues that the UK is, and an overrunning of Islam and Sharia law? Do we take the same approach?
Yeah. Okay. So hold on.
I don't think I quite caught. Yeah, go ahead.
So like from Muslims, right? So like if Muslims, right, they're
you're saying
worshiping.
Should we outlaw Islam? Is that what you're saying?
Should we outlaw Islam?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Well.
I got this. All right. Here we go. So this is what's
just
great
so
about
we're
our
clear.
government system. This is the age-old debate, and this is what's important for us to recognize, because this is important. All right, this is the age-old debate within our like, we are not a theocracy in the strict sense.
Right.
However, we are, but we as Christians hold things in tension, just like we talked about with the parable of the talents before. We have ownership, unlike the ancient world. We have ownership and accountability for what we choose to promote and punish through our vote. Okay? So the question is this: if you live in a community and you are a Christian and the majority of your community is Christian, and you want to promote good and punish evil according to your understanding of the world within the constraints of our governance. Now, freedom of religion is enshrined in the Constitution. So the answer to your question from the get-go is no, we will not be outlawing Islam, okay, as a religion that you can practice, all right? Mm-hmm. However, we are absolutely able to outlaw what is taught in our schools. We are absolutely able to outlaw what we allow publicly, or, expressions of that in our society,
public spaces.
In public spaces. There is nothing in our Constitution that prohibits a community from embodying and promoting their mutually held and supported view of the world, Christian or otherwise.
Right.
We are, but here's the issue. The reason I take something like Islam, for example, or pick a different worldview, even if you wanted to take, like, let's use another historical one.
Flat earthers.
Like racism or flat earthers, right? Or like with like the KKK or whatnot. Like when we see something that is morally reprehensible, that does not fit within the context of our core values, i.e. slavery, i.e. Jim Crow, these things are both contrary to biblical teachings and beliefs and unsupported by our founding documents, and clearly so. Like, it took a little bit of both political and theological jiu-jitsu for people to justify those things, and that's apparent on its face, okay? But if a Christian community wants to promote good as defined by the Bible, as harmonized by the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, because they both come from the Bible, like in terms of their founding principles and ideology, then there should be no conflict and any problem against that. So when we talk about things like homosexuality and should that be promoted, taught, tolerated in society, the answer is, from a Christian perspective, as a pastor speaking to Christians, the answer is no. Why?
And
Because
that's
it
the
is
conversation worth having.
because it is fundamentally against our biblical view of the world, and it is not contrary to the founding documents of our country, which provide for freedom of religion. It does not provide for freedom of nonsense.
So how do we prevent
promoting the notion?
How do we prevent them from just saying, "Well, we'll start our own religion," or essentially taking over a particular denomination of Christianity,
freedom of religion,
and saying this is part of our religion?
They can do that. They can do that. They can.
Freedom
and you know
of
what?
How is it?
religion not the same thing as freedom to flaunt.
Correct.
Freedom to
Correct. Freedom to practice does not.
Yeah, that's
it's
not
not
the same
carte
thing.
blanche.
Okay.
As a chaplain, I mean, in the military, that's the issue. It's like there's religious accommodation. It's the least restrictive means. The government, the federal government, owes the people of this country the least restrictive means to the practicing of their religion. It's not unrestricted. It's least restrictive, which means again to the concept of liberty that your right to practice your religion does not run through my right to practice mine, or the existence of or to undermine the existence of our country, right? Like our country
Which is why legislating the use of pronouns is so wrong.
Correct. It is wrong. Absolutely. Because it's not religious. It's fundamentally...
I come back to the like, for instance, like honor killings in Islam. That's morally permissible. In fact, it's morally right and justified.
And it has a large majority of Western
So
society.
then this is Josh. This is where you
honor killings are essentially honor killings would be that if a father has a rebellious daughter that goes against his wishes, or maybe goes and is promiscuous or is dishonoring to the family,
or gets raped,
legitimately kill them. Or gets raped, yeah. So can legitimately kill them.
Yeah,
and that happens in Eastern culture.
Freedom of religion in our Constitution would allow them to do that?
No, that's the argument. That's the extreme argument that Josh is suggesting.
It's extreme. Now, granted, I have to jump to the extremes, thinking, oh, this is we'd think this is ridiculous. But that's the kind of extreme arguments
the fundamental
that are making that these different ideologies are making, right?
Yeah, well, because
I mean, ultimately, the biggest protection that they could have is essentially create their own religion, which is already what that ideology is, right? They're fanatic about it as if it's a religion. So if I was to put a stamp of, hey, this is a new religion on the front of it as a society, that using the principle of least or what is it, least restriction, or
the least
most
restriction means. But Josh.
Least means how do you
stop that?
How do you respond to that? How do we do that?
Easily. Look at us. Mm-hmm. Look how hamstrung we are. The Bible, our religion literally is the source material for the founding documents of our country, and we're sitting here operating from the defensive.
Right. A coach is not even allowed to lead a prayer with a team. Right. Like, there are plenty of things in
Texas
place.
Is all encouraged
in most places. Yeah,
no, I agree.
So the duality is important to acknowledge. I think that's part of this conversation. It's like, hey, though I acknowledge what you said, Tim, you're allowed to go be gay. If you want it that way, no one's going to stop you. Shut your door and go do whatever you want.
Why should you be allowed to go be gay? Why do you make the distinction between that specific kind of immorality and other crime?
For the same reason you're allowed to go watch porn tonight. For the same reason you're allowed to go cheat on your wife tonight.
I would outlaw cheating on your wife. I don't understand what's the distinction.
Are supported. What Tim's saying is important, because this is true. There is no constitutional guarantee for your right to look at porn. There's no constitutional guarantee for you to cheat on your wife, and there's no constitutional guarantee for you to be gay. All of those things used to be illegal in this country, and it was
widely understood that they should
be. Understood. They were morally reprehensible in society. Even in the United States military today, adultery is a UCMJ offense. You can be charged for cheating on your wife. You can be charged for being gay.
Wow.
Still, I mean, not being gay, but for sexual acts are still technically sodomy is still technically a UCMJ-able offense.
What I hear coming through is the idea that you shouldn't legislate morality. And that argument doesn't make any sense to me, because you only legislate morality.
Correct.
But here's the thing: it's a slippery slope, because you go to say, "Hey, let's legislate morality." Hold on, because you say we legislate morality, now we're subjecting ourselves to those who determine what morality is.
No,
and if we say, we can go ahead and legislate morality.
No,
no,
Josh.
100%. You have within Congress, you have within our legislative branch, they can create laws based on the morality of somebody else.
Yes. This is the libertarian argument that you're
No.
making. Okay, it's the libertarian argument that says, we can't make laws to enforce our morality, or they might make laws to enforce their morality.
And guess
what?
Laws
They're doing it anyway.
Yeah.
Okay, but I have a
Josh,
question then.
we have. Hold on, pause real quick. This is the difference. This is the fundamental difference. You're talking about what could happen. I'm telling you what is legal now. Our Constitution does not allow for that. You would have to fundamentally change our government, which has only happened a couple of times in a very, very, very restrictive ways. Has our Constitution been amended?
I don't think that you would be able to prevent
you would have to amend
legislatively for the federal government to allow local Sharia law.
You would 100% have to. You would 100% have to amend the Constitution because it would fundamentally undermine the Bill of Rights. You cannot do that.
How would it undermine
honor
the Bill
killings
of Rights to allow? Yeah.
Every person
you think
is,
a local government,
murder.
if it was
murder
a Muslim city,
murder is
could
still murder.
legalize honor killings?
Okay.
Is that what you're saying?
But
Yeah.
no, I'm not saying that it's that's
Sharia
an extreme,
law.
guys.
No,
I understand that, but I'm saying
what parts
this,
of Sharia law are we
we're
worried
happening.
about?
So here's the thing. Take a step back. This is what's happening in other Western cultures, okay? To think that, our Constitution is so impenetrable and our system is so much better than everybody else's it won't be, okay, fine. But
That's
here's
why
the
it
thing.
hasn't changed
We
yet.
also have laws, but they don't get enforced. So there's the other answer to that, right? It's already illegal for people across the border. It's not enforced. You have in France and in the UK, there's areas where the police just don't go, and they allow Muslim communities to run their own communities.
You're right.
So you can make the argument that say our system of government wouldn't allow for it, but the system of government is only as powerful as the people that are actually enforcing it.
But listen,
right?
America is the most overly policed country in the world. I've been living in Europe now for 2 years. I've seen like 10 cops. Okay, like everyone talks about how policed, like, or maybe I'm not in a major city. That's probably part of the reason why. But like, enforcement here is not the same as it is in the U.S. Like in America, we can go into there's a whole other episode on this problem. But my point is that it can be challenged in the courts. We have a system where even if something is not enforced, if I decide to sue you or claim a grievance against the federal government, I can prove it in a court of law and I have recourse because I have the law on my side. The difference, so what you're suggesting, while possible theoretically, is incredibly improbable because our fundamental system of governance is based on a Christian worldview. And it is. It fundamentally is.
I get that, but I think
you
that
have to
it really
change
comes
it at
down
its
to
root.
But it comes down to the enforcement of it. We're already seeing things that we would have never expected not be enforced that are already laws.
Yes, we absolutely need follow through on existing laws. We talked about that at the beginning with people exposing themselves to minors, and these are actual crimes. Yes, and what I am saying is that the problem that we're running into is that Christians, moral people, sensible people who don't even consider themselves Christians, but they are within the Christian tradition without even really realizing it. They have been browbeaten into the, you can't legislate morality, or, what good will that do? I'm saying it's time to call down the fire and put the prophets of Baal to the sword with every means that we have available. No, that does not mean right now violent, uprisings against, pride parades
just
or
for
whatever.
Clarification.
But it does mean that if you see impotence in the enforcement mechanisms, you don't throw up your hands and say, well, shucks, the enforcement mechanism failed. I guess we can't legislate morality. No.
Yeah, you take them to court.
Yes. You do everything you can.
Let me just, at this point, I'll leave it there, and you can move on and ask other questions, Tim. But this comes back to a previous conversation that we had about like legislating morality and everything. And again, my position for clarifying, I've never seen, and we don't have any evidence of even a theocracy or a Christian nation that has ever been able to wield power responsibly. And so that's not to say that we should just give up, but I think we should actually put some things in place to make sure that we're avoiding canon law, we're avoiding the Spanish Inquisition.
You're rearranging the deck chairs on the
things
Pride
like that.
Parade.
Hold on,
okay?
pause. I got this first. Me first. Okay. First of all, one, what is the purpose of government? I've said it like 3 times on this episode.
To promote evil and
That's what I did last
That's
episode.
what you said.
I said it last time.
To promote good and defeat evil. Yes.
Okay. Is that not legislating morality?
Well, I'm not saying in general. Like, yes, I think all legislation is moral in a sense, right?
So
To some extent.
some morality
What I'm
we
saying
legislate.
is from a religious perspective, right? I would not want to live under the
We
Catholic
solved
Church
that.
in the
You're right, brother.
1300s.
And that's
I
why
wouldn't
we
want to
solved-
live
If I forced you to
under-
live in San Francisco today or ancient or like Rome under the popes, which would you pick for you and your
Look,
kids?
100%. I'd rather live under the Rome. But here's the thing, though. Like, what you're jumping to extremes. You're
Yes,
jumping to
to
extremes.
make
Because
a
What
that's
I'm
what
point.
saying,
fully manifest, Josh.
What
You're
I'm saying,
talking about,
look,
I want you to judge
look,
the seed.
I'm talking-
And what I'm saying is
look.
the seed turns into a fruit. And the fruit is San Francisco.
look, I get it. Yeah, it is very fruity there. But that's the point. I'm trying not to overstep. Right now,
You're being
Tim,
very
I think
generous.
What you're saying. Here's the thing. Here, I am being very generous, and I realize that. And Tim, I feel like I have to be generous because Tim is going so hard. But here, even to Tim's
off
own
with their
admission,
head.
it's like exactly. We're not talking about a violent uprising against pride
Correct.
parades and going
Correct.
and doing
Correct.
violence. That's not what we're doing. But we do need to control the narrative.
Yeah,
we
I'm saying,
do need to take
get
the stance
vote in
and
a district
vote-
attorney that will actually prosecute people who expose themselves to children, who perform lewd acts in front of children.
Correct.
Put them in jail.
And we
Put
are
them
on
in
the same
jail
page there.
for the longest time that
totally.
you can. Pass new laws specifically to target this kind of behavior. Take children whose parents take them and expose them to these things on purpose from their parents. Do it.
Yes.
Okay? That's where
Right.
we are. And the longer we sit there like, well, should we legislate morality? Yes. And you should do it aggressively and you should do it today.
I feel
And
like
you
we're
correct Josh,
overusing
no.
that term of
No,
legislating
that's the
reality because
term,
we don't
Josh.
disagree with that.
That's a fundamental term.
I'm not disagreeing with that. What I'm disagreeing with is legislating a morality,
A religion?
that
One
eliminates,
religion?
Yeah,
We have a protection against that.
Don't legislate a religious
Code.
a religious code. Yeah, that's what I'm avoiding.
An ethical system?
Because here's the thing, not an ethical system, but I'm talking about like the things that you would get arrested for, the things that you would get arrested for in Israel that were not part of the Torah, right? For doing something on the Sabbath, Jesus was against, right? So there's certain things where I just don't trust either side. Here's the
hear you.
reality.
That's the
I would
libertarian
rather work.
approach.
I would rather work. In my experience, I have a better time working for a non-religious institution than a religious institution.
You're right.
Because corruption is somehow,
I know.
or not corruption, but the domineering nature of Christian institutions or businesses or
Who hurt you, Josh?
organizations.
Tell us.
I know. Oh, let me tell you. Let me tell you who hurt me.
Don't actually tell us.
But here's the reality. I mean, like I won't get into all the details, but
I know what
but
you
my experience, it's just it just
Okay.
seems like
Yeah,
it seems
but
like
your
there's
reticence
Let me
to commit
reframe.
to
Further
authority doesn't
justification.
mean the authority stopped existing, or because there will be an authority.
we're not arguing on that. We're
No,
not
he's
arguing
not.
on
I
that.
understand,
I'm
Josh.
talking
Let
about,
me reframe.
Yeah.
Okay. Here's what I hear Josh saying, and I tend to agree with you. Is that less is more, right? When you
Right.
place the more restrictive you get with, or prescriptive, let me rephrase this, the more prescriptive you get in legislation, right? The more it can be used, it can be weaponized, and it can be turned. Because the more prescriptive you get, you also have to get more prescriptive in the authority, in the authoritative content, right? So like,
Right.
and we get into this all the time, and this is where we get into denominational problems, right? So like more
Right.
legislation, and I agree with this, because this is what I would suggest, is that I do believe that the government exists to legislate morality. It is literally its function, okay? But I believe that government is cancer, generally speaking. Like a little of it, like you're going to be okay. Like a lot of it, and you're not going to have a good time. So like for anybody. And so for me personally, like I think there's core stuff that we think that needs to be legislated on and used to be. And this is kind of why when we're talking about this content, it's so frustrating, because it's like, you know, we got rid of things like, you know, when we removed, you know, homosexuality from the DSM. Why? There was no new science. There was no new evidence. It was social pressure, right? Like science put it on the DSM, but like science didn't take it off of the DSM. Right. You know, certain behaviors and certain things that were legislated against that existed for a reason. And then, but the reason that they were taking off wasn't a refutation of those claims. It was simply social pressure. So I think the tension here is this, that historically speaking, certain behaviors and attributes associated with pride in the LGBT community have been illegal in every culture on the face of this planet for almost as long as we've had writing to talk about it. And so the argument as it pertains to this particular discussion is that are those laws justified and helpful, or were they not? And from a Christian perspective, I would argue, especially in America, that they were helpful and they were beneficial. And then, you know, they changed. And so now, what are Christians' responsibilities to that? Now, does that mean we go and create what I disagreed with Tim about was like we should have more laws, and I'm like, okay, like the laws we had we already have are pretty sufficient if they're enforced for those types of things,
right?
But like more law is, I just it's because the issue is that if this gets back to the root cause, like if Christians are actively engaged in their communities and they're voting, and if our government system reverts back to the way that it was, which pushes the power down to the local level in a federalist, government, then I'm more inclined to be. I'm happy to create a law if I know I can change it just as easily. What we see historically, and this gets back to kind of what Nick was talking about, is that we need to write and talk about these things based on the way that the world is, not the way that we wish the world was. The way that the world is this: laws go on the books and they don't come off.
Right.
And it's infinitely harder to change a law that's existing than to create a new one. So, I feel that I'm saying that there is definitely tension there.
There is the tension. And I think that, you know what, here's the thing though. I think it needs to exist, like the conversation and the extremes actually benefit both sides, right? To have somebody that is very, very more laws, and then the people that say less laws, because then I think we find a good balance. In fact,
and
that
that's
may be
the thing
why
that's
God
so
allows.
Frustrating at this day and age is you have people like you who largely agree with people like me, but you're still advocating for balance in the face of people who literally want to prostitute your children.
Well, okay, now. Yes, I think we would agree that, I wouldn't want people to prostitute my children. At the same time, I wouldn't prosecute a 14-year-old who's, sexually confused.
Right, but that's my point. Is you're looking at changing course, and then you look at the horizon and say, well, I don't want to end up there. It's like, well, maybe start by turning around. Why do you need to look towards the extreme conclusion of some reactionary force that doesn't even exist yet and say, well, maybe we should turn around slower? That's the strategies that I see you adopting, and it's entirely counterproductive.
I don't think that's not what I'm.
That's not what you're saying.
Yeah, I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is, like, look, with these issues, it is very. It's not as black and white as you're making it sound.
What do we do now?
What do we do now? Okay, so this is what we do: is we essentially take and promote this or this ideology that the body is not separate than the soul. Right? It's not essentially that we have the sacred and the secular. What is happening in society today is that we look at the body and it is a disposable thing. It has no value. There is no intrinsic value to the body, and that is the cause of the hookup culture. Why we could just go and have sex with whoever we want without consequence. Why we can kill babies, because the body is just a combination of cells, right?
The
sexual revolution. You have homosexuality, euthanasia, transgenderism. Essentially, all of that is basically devaluing the body. And what we ought to do is we can say, no. There is no distinction, right? The body is intrinsically valuable because it is part of the person. First of all, we also need to get rid of any kind of legislation that gives any allowance to a identity. Like somebody has an identity and they're defined by a particular feeling or feature. I am not my sexual preference, right? Neither is somebody that is a homosexual. They are not, who they are is not their sexual preference, right? That just like how ridiculous it would be to hear somebody say, I'm a porn addict and that's just who I am, right? Like they have these inclinations. They have these chemical makeups. What? Identity?
Which
No.
Shouldn't have the Civil Rights Acts?
What are you talking about?
No, yeah.
I'm talking about
you just advocated for getting rid of the Civil Rights Act.
How is a feeling?
How so?
How is a feeling a separation of
you said
something
to
that
get
is
rid of legislation related to your identity.
And I defined identity as what?
Maybe I mistaken.
Preferences,
feelings. He means feelings.
So your feelings, right?
Physical
separating
stuff. Subjective criteria.
Okay.
Josh.
Like,
to define it by subjective criteria.
Subjective criteria. Sorry. Yes, I agree with that. So in that sense, right, we have these things where we're not saying we're giving validation to the way that we have preferences. You know, and that's the thing that I get frustrated with when it comes to conversations that happen around homosexuality, transgenderism. It's like, it's just who I am. This is how I feel. I can't stop being attracted to the same sex, or I can't stop feeling like I'm a woman in a man's body. But the reality is, we all feel that. What if I was to justify, you know what? I can't control that I want a cheeseburger and fries. Like, don't go put me on, you know, any kind of medication and force, you know, like, granted that's not forced, but like, or let's take porn addiction, for instance, right? That is the same. Like there is a chemical breakdown,
physiological,
a neurological, pathways that are developed for people that are addicted to porn. If they start justifying and saying, well, I can get into this type of porn or different types of fetishes and that's just who I am, like that's a problem, right? So we should not allow that type of ideology or allow any kind of legislation or conversations that maybe not more legislative or laws to be around subjective things. So, but Tim, I know
we're just going to have to do a whole episode on legislating morality one day, because I have so many problems with you.
We'll do a long form on that.
But I wanted something Nick was talking about earlier, and I totally interrupted him. But my question is, and maybe I misunderstood you, but it sounded like you wouldn't outlaw pornography if you could.
Yeah, to be honest with you, I do lean libertarian in a heavy, major way, and I'm not afraid to acknowledge that.
Is it a job security thing?
So, no.
Want to make sure that there's always clients.
Because now that there is an interesting. It is worth going slow when not just discussing this, but when discussing all things like this, because there's a lot of depth and nuance, and the slippery slope is worth at least discussing. And what that is people jump to, you're talking about legislating morality. No, I'm more interested in discussing, should we legislate actions? Because legislating morality and legislating actions are two different things. And so we legislate that children are not allowed to smoke cigarettes. We do not legislate that adults are not allowed to smoke cigarettes. And the list goes on. And so I think, for me, I would absolutely draw the line and get out of bed with, it should absolutely be illegal for children to be exposed to hardcore pornography in any and all of its forms, and you should be prosecuted to the absolute nth degree of the law if you're in any way illicit in any of that, which very much falls in line with pride parades and drag queen hours and children, any level of exposure to children. But yeah, no, I don't actually think we should say you will go to jail if you're caught watching porn.
Okay.
Okay.
What
As an
about
adult.
you go to jail if you are caught producing or distributing porn?
Probably still no.
Okay.
Probably still
Yeah,
no. Unless it was to
one
minors.
without- you can't
Unless
have
it
one
was to
without the other.
minors.
Okay, but why?
Right.
But
Unless
here's my
it was-
question. Here's my question, Nick. You said something
Yeah.
interesting. So you say legislating actions versus
the
legislating
battle
morality.
axe?
I understand why.
battle axe.
I can see. Where's my tiny battle axe? That's right. Where it is? Here it is. Yeah. There it is. We're in business. All right. So, here's what I would suggest with that is I see why you make that point. You're saying, we're talking about the act versus the other, right? But you have to ask yourself the question. Like the cigarettes one is a great example.
It is immoral. Watching pornography is
correct.
Immoral.
And the reason
But we're having a discussion about legislating.
I specifically asked you
Correct,
about
but here, let me ask
the
this.
production, distribution, and so on.
Right, but here's the issue. So let's take the cigarette one. The reason that kids aren't allowed to smoke cigarettes is because we know it's bad for you, right? We know it's bad for you.
It's bad for you too. Yeah.
Correct. And so, but children aren't
Can't
able
decide
to
for
make
themselves.
really good
Don't have
decisions
fully
about that,
mature
right?
brains.
Correct.
So
we don't
Correct.
want to subject
you.
them to something that's harmful. We
Correct.
outlaw drugs, though, because they're harmful to adults, but we only outlaw some drugs that are harmful to adults.
I
Now,
was gonna say.
I'm with you. I am very libertarian as well. I think less is more, to our point, right? And I think society should, generally speaking, mitigate those things through what we're talking about here. Like, I think what is ideal in a society is that the government does not need to legislate moral correction because society is
Action.
doing that on its
Ideally.
own. Okay?
Right.
Ideally.
And that's my libertarian that stretches in
And
me,
I
which
agree
is what
that.
I was very excited about this conversation with the Pride Month, is because back to the ode to Jordan, shout out to Jordan Peterson. It's like, it's personal responsibility. We live in this culture. It's how you move through the world and how you teach and train your children to move through the world and how you coalesce as a community to move through the world.
So what do you
Can
do
I-
then,
can I
Nick, when
offer
a
people
counterpoint
show
to
up in
the-
your town? But let me finish this real fast. But here's where you run into trouble, Nick. What do you do when somebody imposes their views on you?
Oh
and
yeah, you fight.
imposes-
I'm all there.
But
I'm
my
all there.
point, but here's the issue. But now they have the law on their side, and you don't have the law
Because
on
they're not
yours.
libertarians. They
And
believe
That's a
in
big-
using
and
the
they're
power
not
of
breaking-
the government to
they're not
enforce
breaking
their
the law.
morality.
in your fictional scenario, you'd made a huge jump. When and how did they just get the
Right,
law?
like
on their
he's just
When
side?
they
sitting still
painted
the whole time.
crosswalks with
Easily.
pride flags
Easily.
and started prosecuting
Yeah,
people
when
for
they
leaving
walk
tire
through
marks
your
on it.
neighborhood with holding
Speak-
when they walk
speak-
through your
speak
neighborhood
slowly.
holding hands.
Speak slowly and start
Yeah,
from the
so it's already
they-
legislated.
It's illegal
What
for
is
you
already
to tell
legislated?
that they can do what they want
It's
wherever
the
they want.
promotion
That's not clear.
of the
That's
not
broadly
what- that's not what you were
LGBT
talking about.
agenda.
No, it is. It is. What I'm
legislated.
saying is this.
Josh, you were
I-
talking about them coming after him with the
Correct.
law on their side.
And
that's
this is
not
what I
something
know.
that
I said,
is
what do you do? Yeah, it is,
legislated.
because here's what happens. What do you do when a person exposes themselves to your child? Okay? Now,
What do you
in
do
this
when
case,
someone
this would be
demands you
illegal.
bake a cake?
Or if they're holding hands in front of, or they show up in front of your house every day and make out in front of your front door as your kids are walking to school. Now that's an extreme situation, but what if you tell them, I don't want you to do that in the view of my children? Or what when your teacher says, I can talk about, my relationship with my, spouse in my 3rd grade class or my 2nd grade class? What do you do when you're like, I don't want that, and maybe you don't have the means to homeschool, and you because both of you and your parents have to work, so I have to leave my kids here.
The two of you have given me like 8 examples, and
Yeah.
none of them have yet given me a single reason to understand what
Okay,
you're saying.
can I see if I can round that
Yeah,
up
John,
real
yeah,
quick?
go ahead, Tim. Yeah,
And then Anderson, I know we'll jump back to you. You're coming from a libertarian perspective and saying
100%,
I don't
acknowledged.
Yeah, okay. And you're saying, well, I don't want to use the government to do that, to enforce my morality, etc. And The point that I am trying to make is that the people who are diametrically opposed to your beliefs are already trying to use the law to the maximum extent to promote their warped morality. They drag you through court if you don't participate as a vendor in their gay weddings, okay? They are engaging at all levels. I mean, you have so
okay, but stop.
So how do you square that with your
that
libertarian?
Example,
yeah, go ahead.
Hold on.
So in that example, is what are you proposing? Because I would say go to court, fight.
Okay.
Did the person that didn't bake a cake end up getting in trouble?
That's a great question. Okay, so here's the thing:
that they had to go to court.
That particular case, the case that went all the way to the Supreme Court, which is costly, by the way. Okay, so let me ask you: to what extent do you have a right if you can be compelled to fight for it for over a decade in court? Okay, because that's where the line of scrimmage is right now, is that it's not even clear enough that you don't have to bake a cake for a gay wedding, that you have to spend a personal fortune and lose your business just to defend your right not to do it. Okay,
that is a good argument. So you're saying that there is a coercion,
correct,
presupposed, even by making a decision like that, and you're not coming from two equal points.
Correct.
But then
you're
the other
fighting
person had to
against
spend
people
the
who
same
don't
amount
have
of
your
cost
principles
as well,
about
right?
using the government.
No, they didn't. In that specific instance, they would have to take you to court in that specific instance, right? But in a different instance, like what I'm saying, like what I was trying to point out is that if like with a teacher or something like that, like if it's not in the libertarian society where there's no standard one way or the other, let's just say it's even more it's more open than it is even now, where it's not illegal, but it's also not forced on people, then, what do you do when your teacher the teacher of your kid wants to, expose this, or somebody is doing that and you say stop, but they want to persist, or maybe they bring their friends and their friends come and persist, like Wild Wild Country and Netflix, when a bunch of cult members show up in your town.
We're talking about sexual examples, but in public school, creationism or evolution is like the norm. It's a perfect example.
And we should fight that too. Yeah.
Well, that's what I'm getting at.
Right.
It's like we just have to fight everything and go hide under a rock.
You have to fight because we've given up too much ground.
Correct.
And then when I
say, hold on, let me jump in with what I'm saying. I get what you're saying. Like we should not give up ground and we should be aggressive about it. Here's the problem, and this comes back to my original point, right? But you're talking about like going to the okay, well, should that person be allowed to make you spend all this money to go to court? I mean, let's vice versa, right? What if I have a gay cake baker make me a straight wedding cake and they don't, and I force them to do it and they don't want to do it, and that goes all the way. Like it could go both ways all the time. What I'm saying is when it comes to like this particular conversation and what we're dealing with in this country, what we got to be careful of is that we're not building a fence around the law. Because that's exactly what happened.
What do you mean by that?
That's exactly what Jesus pushed back.
What do you mean by
so the Pharisees built a fence around the law so that we wouldn't violate the law. So here's the thing: if we start saying we're going to legislate all of these fences that are outside of the bounds of this country's
I have not described a single fence that is not part of core morality
in the Bible. Correct, or the Bible.
No,
so if you're saying you can't legislate, Josh, if we're talking about legislating, take the strictest section. Yeah.
Let's go back to what let's make sure we're staying on topic here, because we're going back to what Nick was saying about banning or outlawing pornography, allowing in the libertarian sense, right? So they're with that. If we start prosecuting people that are distributing pornography, or we start prosecuting people that are viewing pornography, right? I don't think that even in the New Testament there were certain things that were. That Jesus would say, well, we're going to re-implement the Torah and stone somebody.
The difference is
if
that's
you kick somebody in the balls,
we're not
right?
a church. That's the difference. Here's the question.
I understand that.
No, Josh,
but you're taking the approach. You're taking the stance. You're taking a religious stance in a
because they're accountable.
Government.
Josh, do you think that as a leader of this government?
No, but you can't hold a secular government.
Yes, you can.
You can't hold a secular. Hold on. You can't hold a secular government to a religious law.
There is only religious law.
You can't vote that.
Bro,
that's
the
secular government. We are not a theocracy.
Okay, this is the distinction I want you to explain to me. This is the distinction I genuinely want you to explain to me, okay? You are making an implicit, and I realize it's been the undercurrent of what you've been saying the whole time, and it's kind of the source of a lot of the disagreement that we're having. You make a distinction between religious morality and law and like what is the appropriate realm of secular law and morality. Sure. And that's not a difference that exists.
That's
and
not
if
real.
It does,
that's fake.
I need you to explain to me what the difference in God's eyes, where secular law ends and religious moral law begins.
Well, even within religious law, you had civil law, ceremonial law, and ritual.
Still religious
law.
Those
are all religious law.
There is difference, but at the same time, also at the same time, God didn't have Israel enforce their law on other countries.
They put them to the sword,
right? Like,
sir.
No, yeah, they did.
No, he didn't hold. He didn't go and say, "Hey, you have to." You have to.
Josh, that's the wrong question. Hold on. Pause. This is the difference between Israel and other people. We are not talking about nations set apart. We're talking about America, where unlike them, unlike Israel, Israel was accountable for their use of their laws. The kings were judged by God for their righteousness according to the law. We are Americans. Our government system says, in God we trust, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We are a nation.
I agree with you.
Correct. No, but that's my point. Our country was founded on biblical morality. And if you are a Christian living in America, you are held by God to the account of stewarding your vote and your governance of this nation, in so much as you have any part of it, to the biblical standard. God will not judge. We do not judge secular people for how they vote. I don't blame a lost person or a lost leader for ruling from their ignorance or their rebellion. I will judge Christians for voting and supporting secularism over righteousness. And what Tim is saying and what I'm agreeing with is that that is a false dichotomy. If you are a Christian,
you just said that you wouldn't charge or hold it against somebody that is secular to make the decisions of being secular.
He doesn't mean
that's all I'm saying.
But we're talking about
I'm not holding people.
But
here's the thing: I'm not holding. Like, are they sinners or are they saints? Right? Like these people that we're talking about that we're disagreeing with, like they're broken people, right?
What are we talking about?
I'm not going to hold.
But we're talking about.
I'm not going to hold them to a standard.
We're talking about
that I don't think that.
About what should we do as a country? We're talking.
I agree,
Josh,
as a country, but we're holding them to
country.
a standard that we're not. Right, we're holding them to a religious standard that they wouldn't necessarily agree with.
They can choose,
or that they wouldn't hold themselves
to.
No. We own this. This is the point. We are American citizens. If you live in a town and you vote in that town for that elections, and some guy gets up and says, "I'm going to run for office on a biblical platform," I think that homosexuality is wrong. I think that transgender messages and LGBTQI messages are toxic and should not be exposed to children. I think pride parades should be illegal. I think porn should be illegal. I think we should vote for those things. And that's what I'm going to do in my county if you elect me, versus guy who says, "I'm a libertarian. I think people should be able to do whatever they want. And if you're a Christian, you can do what you want. And if you're an active predator, you can do whatever you want, so long as it's not against the rule that already exists."
That's not the libertarian.
I
know
that, but I'm saying no. But it's fundamentally is. It's basically saying. But
I feel like based on the examples that you guys keep bringing up, where you're jumping to the extreme side of.
I'm bringing up strictly real world.
I don't feel like I'm disagreeing with you. I get it, but you're straw manning it because you're not actually representing.
No, we're not straw manning it because we actually believe
representation. Hold on, you're taking an extreme representation of it to make it easier to destroy. That's literally a straw man. So what I'm saying is, I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm not disagreeing with you that we at a local level to go and say, hey, let's eliminate exposing yourself to children.
Oh, I do it at a federal level.
But what I am saying
is, it's not a straw man. I actually advocate and believe these things.
What I'm saying is, I don't disagree with you. I'm saying, yes, if you're going to expose yourself in public that is already existing, that is a violation. However, if you're going to participate in a pride parade, that is not a federal offense.
Why?
So that is the balance. That is a balance because it is a freedom of expression, and that is a foundational aspect
of expression isn't even
our.
No,
you're right. He's right. Josh is right. Josh is right. No.
So what I'm saying, you guys,
what
I'm saying is it's a little bit frustrating because it sounds like you're going to an extreme of what I'm saying. What I'm saying is based on and in the institutions and the founding of this country, you could talk about being a homosexual. You could say and express your opinion to promote homosexuality. However, the moment that you participated in those things, then it was illegal, right? I'm not even disagreeing. Like, I'd be fine, right, going and saying, look, if you go and participate in these things to like an adultery or something or something like that within the military, like there is a UCMJ. It's not a federal offense, and maybe there should be more restrictions on like divorce laws, right? And the no fault laws and stuff like that. Like, I think that there should be stricter standards, but let's not jump the shark. Let's not go too far.
What do you think I'm jumping to that's too far? That's my.
Because you're legislating action, like what Nick was saying.
I think we have an interesting place we could land where Tim is absolutely on the side of, yeah, we should absolutely legislate all these things and put people behind bars if it happens.
There is a pragmatic flavor on top of that. Okay, just to be clear, there is a pragmatic flavor on top of that says you do have to do what is actually possible in the political environment that you're in. Okay, so there is a little bit of daylight between what Tim, Lord Protector of the former United States of America, would implement and what I think is actually viable to advocate for within the actual realities of the political system that we have. The frustrating thing that I feel that I deal with on the religious and political, particularly the religious right, is exactly, I think, the fake distinction that the libertarian religious view says, hey, we can't legislate this type of morality because X, Y, and Z, and you end up stopping short of the kind of aggressive legal action that is necessary to stop a very aggressive, immoral, predatory opposition who is literally, their literal stated goal is to convert your children to their way of thinking and prostitute them.
Yeah, I agree with that, Tim, and the nuance of that, I agree with you. But what I've been hearing is that just here's the red line, and there's no clarity, there's no practicality to it. And so that's what it sounded like to me. In the same way that you heard me saying, well, libertarian, and it's okay, we don't need to legislate it, but there's some practicality in it. And I agree. I don't think we should give up legal ground, and I think we should fight.
But you are giving up legal ground. That is actually the point that I'm making, though. Is
I'm not giving up legal ground.
Let me explain.
In what way am I giving up legal ground?
I'm about to explain. Mister, don't interrupt me. The legal ground that you're giving up is that you're saying, well, we can't enforce X, Y, and Z at the federal level or via law or whatever because that's religious law. So we can't use the government to do that. So,
well, give me that XYZ example, because XYZ interprets as an extreme view. Give me a specific example of what you think I'm giving up. What law?
Well, for example, you wouldn't have, unless I misheard you, you would not have outlawed the promotion of homosexual lifestyles. So I'm not talking about action. I'm talking about...
What do you mean? Define promotion of homosexual
pride parades?
Yeah, pride parades.
Like talking about it?
Yeah, would you outlaw pride parades?
Public.
No.
Public.
Okay. That's
public display.
This is the point of disagreement. My goal is not to convert you here. My point is to distill the disagreement so it's clear what the actual fault line is.
Sure.
Is that you wouldn't outlaw pride parades. Okay? They would outlaw they would literally, and this, we know this because this was passed in both houses of the California legislature, and it was 11th hour vetoed by Gavin Newsom because he saw that even there, it was just a bit too suicidal. Taking children away from their married biological parents who do not affirm their gender identity based on the testimony of government employees, social workers, teachers, what have you. Okay, so you're worried about not outlawing pride parades, and they're looking for levers to take your children away.
No, he's not suggesting that Josh is promoting that. He wasn't suggesting that, Josh.
I'm not
saying
right, no, that's the imbalance. You have one side who says we want to be able to take your children away through legal means, and we have the other side, which is yours, which says we won't want to outlaw pride parades. You see how the line of scrimmage ends up way over here.
I get that. I get that, Tim. But what you're saying is be as bad as they are when it comes
not
to
as bad because we are correct. We are
be as aggressive
we
as
are
they
the
are.
light of the world. We have the true morality, and we will pursue it aggressively.
But
we will bring the light.
It, but you can't force it. You can't force it on anyone.
Of course you can.
In this example,
pick
an example just for a minute.
Force somebody's actions.
You think I can't stop a pride parade by force?
Tim, stop.
No. You can't. You can't stop somebody. What you're doing is you're completely happy with people just pretending to be Christians. Then
No, hold on, pause. Before we move on.
Because, you're legislating action.
Yes, I am legislating the proscription of pride parades.
Yes.
Okay.
You know
why is that not possible in your world? Why is your mind not have the possibility?
Nerds,
hold on.
Stop talking.
Okay.
Hold on, I'm interrupting. All of you, for the love of God.
This is so great.
Listen, this is the same argument that we use this exact same justification, Josh. I think this is kind of Tim's point. We do not allow companies to advertise to minors, right? We don't let cigarette companies advertise to minors, right?
Sure.
It's illegal, federally illegal, right?
And subject of much court debate.
Pride parades get a pass based on free speech. The fundamental difference between why one is able to hold up in court and one is not is because we can draw a clear, secular, moral line in cigarettes kill people, young people have underdeveloped brains and can't make decisions well, so we shouldn't expose them to something that could hurt them physically, right? There's no Bible in there, there's no moral framework.
Right.
But as a Christian, the exact same justification that was used to say we should outlaw the advertisement of cigarettes to minors, that same legal precedent could be used to say pride parades should also be illegal. Why? Because they promote something that we have to our mutually agreed upon stance that that lifestyle or act or behavior should be illegal, right? From a biblical standpoint. If that's the case, then
I think that's too close to the infringement on the freedom of speech.
I just don't see how it doesn't
because
backfire.
it's the exact same thing. It's the exact same thing as how is it not free speech of a company to say why can't I talk about how great cigarettes are? Well, why can't I do that? It's federally illegal.
If you did it as a private citizen, it would be contributing to the delinquency of a youth. It doesn't even have to be a company.
Correct. It's illegal. So why is that different?
Wait. What's illegal? If I walk down the street smoking a cigarette,
promoting cigarettes,
if I walk down the street smoking a cigarette in front of a child, I am breaking no laws.
No,
it actually depends on the if you not just that.
If I say to that child, "This thing's amazing,"
you could be prosecuted for contributing to the delinquency of a youth.
No, you absolutely could, Nick.
Yeah, man.
Really?
Where?
Just because nobody's prosecuting it,
I don't want to specifically call out some of my own personal experiences, but I assure you, you could be prosecuted for that.
Listen, I'm dead serious. There are laws. Nick, what I'm saying is that this is the point. This is the point of this whole conversation.
Cigarettes are
it is a foolish and arbitrary thing. Listen, and we have mutual opinions on this. I picked cigarettes just because it was easy. I know, but here's the point. This is wrap this because this is the nutshell of this issue. The real
if you're
gold
still
nugget,
here and you're still listening,
welcome.
Bless you.
Yeah.
Welcome to what it's like to have deep, nuanced.
If you haven't figured out that we're just a bunch of guys drinking in a back porch having conversations yet, that's what this podcast is.
So listen, here's the big takeaway. The arbitrary distinction between secular morality and religious morality is philosophically wrong. It's legally wrong. It makes no sense. Morality is the basic foundation of what is good and what is not good. The ethical systems or the laws are the things in which is how we judge the goodness or badness of a thing. And so the idea that you can separate these two things, that you can have an ethical system that is devoid of a moral foundation that does not have a mutually agreed upon understanding of what good is a farce. So when we say it is illegal for you to advertise to minors cigarettes, but it is not illegal for you to promote and advertise to minors a lifestyle or a belief system that we have also from the same moral system decided is wrong and evil and destructive, those two things
But in this conversation, we were talking about a pride parade. So if I wanted to have a smoke cigarettes parade, it would be the same exact.
And
you
it'd be
actually
illegal.
would not be
You
able
could
to
be
do that in
prosecuted.
most
And
places.
you're not allowed to
in
do
Your
that.
California.
argument.
You couldn't do
Your
that.
argument is
You literally,
that
it is
would
literally
still
illegal to have a smoke
be-
cigarette parade in most places because of the proximity laws about where you can and can't smoke.
Correct. You can't.
But I don't know. I think that's something
pick a
wouldn't
different
stand up
example.
in a
No,
I know you like
that's a
cigarettes.
perfect
I know it's
example.
bothering you, but it's the point. That's. I know how you feel. I know, but listen to me.
It was just an example. The cigarettes is you can
Well,
refute the
it's a
cigarette
perfect
argument
example.
because
No.
of
It's the
additional
same thing with-
laws.
It's the same thing
around-
about having like a neo-Nazi parade, like
Correct.
or
You
a
can't
pro-abortion
promote. The
parade.
reason I say
or
that is
all
because
stuff.
no,
Like,
because
but
those things.
that- there's
It's
nothing.
because it's so
you can't-
clear,
you
Josh.
can't
That's the
prosecute
reason.
that.
The reason I bring up the cigarette one is because it's not argued in our society that it's illegal to promote cigarettes and alcohol to minors. It is a federal offense.
Okay, it's difficult to go and compare a cigarette smoking to a pride parade because they don't. It would
No,
be
it's not.
better.
Josh, that's my point.
It would be
Pause.
a better comparison. Hold on. It would be a better comparison to have a neo-Nazi parade or a KKK parade and a pride parade.
No,
those are
do you know
two
why it's not?
ideologies.
Do you know? No, but that's I understand
How?
why you say that, but that's a false equivalency. Because my point is that it's the same thing from a philosophical discussion of morality and ethics. The reason you're having a problem with it is the reason this discussion is even happening. There is no difference between a physically immoral act and a philosophical, ideological immoral act, biblically or philosophically. The thought virus is equally wrong as the cancer virus. They're equally wrong philosophically. So the idea that I can't talk about the physical wrong and I need to draw a parallel to an ideological wrong, it just muddies the waters. The reason I'm using a physical thing is because it's philosophically they are the same, but we have a different understanding of them because one is more cut and dry for 89% of the population. Everyone agrees that letting kids smoke cigarettes is a bad thing.
I think you're just committing a category error on.
All right,
on
I want to
the-
put a pin in this
I
topic
don't-
do you mean?
because
I
I
don't
want
think-
to.
Put a pin,
Meaning
put a
meaning
pin.
one is physical and one is ideological. Just on its
Correct.
basis and the foundation, they're
Yeah.
different.
Yes.
And
Are
so
they
you're
right
not
or wrong?
acknowledging the difference of that.
I am acknowledging the difference.
You're not
Josh.
acknowledging the difference on that. You're saying that they're
Josh,
the same
I'm
thing.
saying they're the same
One
thing
is just as
philosophically.
dangerous,
No, because
or
we're
one
talking.
is just as
Josh,
harmful.
it's a moral argument.
I agree.
It has nothing to do with it
I
categorically.
agree. Moral.
Category has nothing to do with a moral argument. Is it wrong
One is
for me
an
to slap you in the
ideology, one is a
face, Josh?
physical-
Josh, is it wrong for me to slap you in the face?
Yes. Well, depending.
Is it
on
wrong
what
for
you
me
say.
to tell you a
it's
lie? Josh, is it wrong for me to tell you a lie?
Yes.
Tell me the two wrong things I described
So
to
here's
you.
So you're approaching it and saying that it's not two different things. It is simply philosophical. Cigarette smoking.
I'm making a
and pride parade
philosophical,
are
Josh. I'm making a
both
philosophical argument.
But what
Correct.
I'm saying is the distinction, correct. So in that sense, then that's fine. But that's not what the actual argument is. The argument is based on legislation, and the way that that is decided is that it's not an ideological problem.
It is.
It is a physical
It's a
problem.
philosophical. No, false.
It is a,
false.
No.
False.
Cigarettes were made illegal not because of the ideology of it, but because of the physical effects of it, and you can't deny that.
Josh,
so what
no,
I'm saying is
no,
you're
pause. That's it.
miscommunicating.
You hit
those
it.
two.
No, I'm not. Listen, you hit it on the head.
so
Do you know why it's
what
physical?
legislation-
The physiological evidence is not it. The reason is because it's immoral to give children things that are bad for them. That is a moral law. That is why it's illegal.
Right. A physical
because
aspect.
it's no. Because you gave a child something that was bad for them. That is why it's wrong.
Okay.
If it was wrong because it was just bad for you, it would be illegal for adults too.
We didn't look. We don't the whole. If there was no evidence of physical harm, of cigarettes, then there would be no change of law. And what I'm saying is, you're not there. The reason we're not basing Pride Parade outlaw based on physical effects of
no,
like the
we are on harm.
You could.
Harm.
You certainly
We're basing
could.
it on moral harm, Josh. That's the argument. It's morally wrong.
And here's what I need.
Therefore,
and here's what I want to come back to.
Well, but you keep jumping between
let me jump in
wrong
because here's what I want to come back to. Here's what I want to come back to at another episode, because we're at 90 minutes and we're in the thick of it right now. And here's what I haven't heard, and what I want to maybe tee up for a next episode so people know what they're getting into, because I know where I think, and I think where Josh thinks the boundaries of like legislation and morality and things are. I have yet to hear what I think is a comprehensible, coherent, consistent definition of where Anderson and Nick would draw those lines on a more libertarian basis. I'm not hearing why you would make this illegal and why you wouldn't make this illegal. And in fairness, we haven't given you a lot of time to flesh that out, but that's where I would love to start from next time. Because Hughes and I kind of dominated on the everything is moral law aspect, and I want to know why you think that's not the case, and what your actual framework would be.
I think we actually... I agree with that. I agree with that. But I would say that, Josh, I think you actually agree with me here. I think
I probably do. I just don't. I think we're talking past each other a little bit.
You're hung up on something, but I think like fundamentally what I'm, and maybe it's because of the way I preface this argument, and I know if we got to go, we got to go, but what I was getting at was this. Ethics is about judging the rightness or wrongness of something, okay? And the reason I brought the cigarette, the reason I chose two things that were categorically different was because I wanted to highlight the way in which they're the same is in their categorical wrongness and their categorical rightness. Advertising cigarettes to children is morally wrong. It's a morally wrong question. It's not a health question. It's because we believe that children should not be exposed to things that are harmful to them or have harmful things promoted as good things because they don't have the ability to make that distinction for themselves. So it's a moral justification for the illegality of it that is rooted in, it is connected to its health impact on them. But at its root, it's because it is wrong to tell a child that something is good when it is in fact bad. And so why I'm making that characterization of the Pride Parade is the same thing. To promote something that is as good or as innocuous when in fact we acknowledge it from our worldview as both destructive and dangerous to a child is a parallel. Is that?
But I don't think I disagree with you. If the Pride Parade, for instance, like a drag queen story hour that is directed towards children or something, I would disagree. I think that is harmful. A Pride Parade that is not directed towards children is not same category as a cigarette.
Agreed.
Influence. That's all I'm saying. But I think that's it. Here's the thing. I think we definitely need to draw the line and make sure that, and Europe has gone this way. It's like we need to stop performing these chopidicophomies and these addictomies.
And just to be clear, I'm not on the Hughes side of I think we actually agree. I 100% disagree with you, and I'm sticking to that. So don't
go for it.
I do not accept this false consensus for the sake of harmony.
For unity, that other major theme.
Whatever.
I am the sower of discord.
All right, Tim. See you later.
All right, guys. Love you all.
Around for a second. If you're
good discussion.
Yeah, don't hop off.
Continue
well, if you guys are going to say, I don't want to leave.
You said you were leaving.
Oh yeah, but I thought everybody was going to leave. Now I'm going to miss out.
Ladies and gentlemen, has been another great episode of the I'm Telling God About This podcast. Like and subscribe and share it with your friends. We'll see you next time.
Filthy lib.